Everyone, thank you so much for joining us once again for our Battle Buddy series, our series on the Armor Bearer. And I hope you've been enjoying these. Last time in the previous episode, we got together and we talked about being equipped and sent. And we looked at a portion of the scriptures in the book of Luke where Jesus takes the disciples and his followers, 72 of them, and he takes these individuals. He gives them authority, he gives them power, he equips them essentially, tells them what they should and should not take, and then he sends them out to go do the work, thereby increasing his reach, increasing his ability, and so it was a really wonderful thing that occurred there. Um, the master can only do so much, and so when you take that ability to multiply oneself and you pass on your gifts, you pass on your talents to another, and yet another and another, you increase your ability to reach others. And so essentially that was like where we went last week. And so if you haven't watched that yet, the playlist will show up at the end of this video on the thumb screen, and you can follow along and catch that again if you want a refresher or if you've missed it. So again, once again, I hope you've been enjoying this series. It's been a really joy putting this together. I have another principle for us to go over today in this episode, and so we're just going to buckle up and jump right in. We just want to just get right to the meat of the discussion today, and I hope that you find it really enjoyable. Now, when it comes to any relationships, and in particularly very committed relationships, there is a very important factor that sometimes we overlook or we miss, or just something about those relationships and those things. This factor we tend to cheapen, or we don't look at it in such a way, and that factor, to give that factor about relationships and committed relationships, to give that factor a name, I would quite simply just call it the cost. Okay, the cost. Everything has a cost. Um, Not all of it is directly financial. Some of it is, um, no matter what we do or what choices we make, we pay for it. Whether it's a simple, easy cost, or something that is hugely sacrificial, um, we that happens to us. And so we see that in relationships as well. We see that sometimes when something's going to be demanded of us, we're going to have to pay that cost, and that comes forward in many decisions. It can come forward when it comes to our careers and what jobs we have. It can come forward with um, a purchase of goods. Certain there's a cost that comes when you get a new car. There's a cost that, and not talking about paying for the car. I'm talking about just the surrounding maintenance and the requirements that requires. Um, so there's going to be some tangible things that are going to be demanded with that assumption of goods. There's also, again, we talked about relationships and how there's a cost to relationships, and many more things. I might hit on it again as we go forward in this discussion. But one thing that's important for us to understand when it comes to relationships, in particularly marriage relationships, when when a husband and wife come together, the cost does take a toll on friendships. It takes a toll on friendships with the other genders, and so that's a big thing that comes in, that plays when it comes to the cost of things. Now, the same goes also for the battle buddy. Um, the battle buddy, this is a unique relationship as we consider the armor bearer, and how being in that armor bearer, being in that battle buddy position, and the cost that has, it impacts every area of our lives. And we're going to talk more about that here as we open the Bible. But we, you know, excuse me, sticking with our focus on the New Testament, Jesus, it deals with this idea of cost to his disciples and to his followers. And we're going to read that passage here in a little bit. But even in the Old Testament, just a reminder of cost regarding the Old Testament is that when somebody would enter in the role of being the armor bearer, they would leave behind. I mean, they would, they would leave. Essentially, they would walk out of home and they would enter into a new place and they would serve their new master and they would learn from their new master. And so, if your dad was a carpenter, you would learn up grow in the carpentry business. But if you got flagged for being an armor bearer, you would go and you would serve in the military, or you would serve and learn for a season as an armor bearer to another soldier, and you would be expected to help that other soldier exceed and do something great. And there's a cost that was paid in leaving family and leaving homes and leaving past careers to enter into that new place. But going back to the New Testament, Jesus talks to his followers about what the cost is to be his disciple, the cost to be essentially his armor bearer, to be the battle buddy, what Christ is calling, to follow after him, okay, to follow after Christ. And so we're going to look at Luke chapter 14. In Luke 14, we're going to start reading with a couple verses in Luke 14, 25 through 27. And it's really good. I'm using my NIV Bible today. And so we're just going to jump right in. So Luke 14, 25 through 27. It says, large crowds were traveling with Jesus. And turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. So, right off the bat, Jesus turns to his followers and brings up a lightning term with the word hate. It can be a very strong thing. I mean, even in our society, the idea of hate can be a very strong thing. And even then, to put you into the mindset of those that were in front of Jesus. So when Jesus turns around to these people, imagine yourself in that place where he's turning around, he's looking at you, and so you get an idea of what's going down. The understanding in that culture. See, that was a very strong family-centric culture. And so when Jesus turns around and looks at this family-centric society, and he tells them, unless you hate your parents, your spouse, your kids, your sibling, you can have no part in me. Yes, even your own life. If you can even hate your own life, you can have no part in me. And this is a very big deal. I mean, this is massive to turn around, especially I think too, even for us as modern believers. It's very easy for us to get into this idea of, God is love, and we are to love all people and to love our family especially, and to be there for them, and that's a very important part there. But what he's doing is he's giving us a clear cut, using these terminology, he's giving us a clear cut of priorities. That in the midst of all these priorities, all the priorities of a family-centric structure, a value-driven structure, that the highest valued things in that day are to be nothing compared to him. Nothing compared to Christ and to what he's doing. And so he does that. He goes so far as to emphasize this. He references the cross. And I love this because when he emphasizes this for us, we have to really see what he's emphasizing here. Because at this point in his ministry, the disciples don't know that he's going to be hanging on the cross. The disciples don't know that he's going to carry his cross through the streets and be hung upon it at Golgotha. Okay? And so that's a really big deal. And they don't know that yet. And so Christ uses this imagery of the cross. And to them, in that day and age, they get it. The Roman cross was a form of capital punishment. And what they would do is they would take the chief of criminals, and they would have them carry out portions or either a portion of or the complete cross would be taken up in the street. They would have set areas that where the crosses were literally on display. It was a fear tactic almost of like, you do what this is, what we say. You obey our laws and you obey Caesar. You obey, our king. Or, if you don't and we catch you, this is what happens to the worst criminals. It was a crime deterrent. And so they recognized that the cross was a means of literally giving your whole life. And so Christ is emphasizing for this, and he's using a very colorful term to emphasize that level of priority that we have to put aside the family, we have to put aside the deep relationships that we hold so closely. That in comparison to Christ, Christ is more. Okay, it's this prioritizing him more than all the other close relationships, including probably the closest relationship we can ever have, and that is the relationship we have with our physical body and the relationship we have with ourselves. We live in a society right now that is so, lack of a better expression, we're very, very self-conscious. And because of us being self-conscious, we're conscious about our weight and our exercise, our diet, or to be healthy, I have to eat this food. To be healthy, I've got to eat that. Or I can't drink soda. I can only drink water. I can't have sugar. I gotta be completely sugar free. Or the list goes on. But we are so caught up, even to the point like if there's something wrong with us physically, as soon as we feel something that's remotely wrong with us, we are calling the doctor, calling the chiropractor, and we're like, hey, I got an issue, fix me. And we do that because we emphasize our physical body so much. And what Christ is saying here, he's emphasizing this. He says, no, even if you must even hate yourself. That even following Christ and that commitment should take precedent over our physical lives. And that's something that's been exemplified with missionaries all across the globe throughout history. Missionaries who give their last breath and their last hour of strength just to serve the Lord. And that's a pretty powerful emphasis there that is, I think, might have been grasped well in those days, but I think now concurrently we're so much about our comforts that we kind of miss that. But Christ emphasizes that I'm above your physical body. I'm above the relationship with your spouse. I'm above the relationship with your kids, and he's emphasizing again that thing right there, that level, that priority. See, we live in a time again where the world tries to teach us that self determines our values. Pardon me. Um, that self tries to determine our values, and the issue with that is Christ comes in, and it's supposed to be Christ alone who determines our values, which is vitally important. Now, to help emphasize this high level of cost, Jesus goes on to use two more examples that I'm going to read here. Again, in Luke 14. So we're going to start from where we left off. In Luke 14, verse 28, says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming with him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. So, in both cases, Jesus tells us this great and unforeseen cost to follow him. Okay, this wonderful large thing to follow him. To keep my phone from going off again, I'm going to silence my own device. That's what happens. Um, in both cases, he emphasizes this great unforeseen cost, and I'm using unforeseen because I want you to kind of get this idea of when something's going to happen, you're going to make a decision to go into something, you're going to count and make sure that you can follow through. Okay, it's like it's asking ourselves, am I willing to go and pay such a high price? Am I willing to do what it takes to see the project through? And you know, oh goodness, it's been a long day, church. This is what happens. Am I willing to finish the race? Can I win the war? And with the tasks and the resources I have, can I make it? And being wise and counting the what is it going to make for me to do this, and then making my choices upon that. And this is what he tells his disciples. Um, when it comes to us following Jesus, and it comes to us like making that declaration of faith that I've decided to be a Christian. Sometimes we tend to oversimplify it and make it just this mental assent of I know the truth. I'm going to be a Christian. When according to this verse, the cost of doing that is, are you going to be able to finish it? Are you going to be able to finish this discipleship process that you've engaged on, that you are moving forward? Are you going to finish your walk with God? And it's one of these things, because here is kind of the unnoticed implication. The unnoticed implication is, if I can't finish, I shouldn't start. Like it's that big. If I can't finish this race, if I can't win the war, if I can't do these things, if I can't finish the process, I should not waste my time. And that's a pretty weighty thing, and it's because it's about, as my level of commitment up there with, am I willing to pay the high cost it does to arrive at this place? For many armor bearers, that cost is supposed to be, it's a high cost to be an armor bearer. Ministry leaders, when it comes to being a truly called ministry leader, there is a difference that occurs. And I guess I want to be careful how I put this out there, because this is an important thing. When it comes to people who are called to do ministry, when you really feel that the Lord is asking you to be a minister, whether it's a missionary or a pastor or a staff pastor, whatever it is, you feel strongly that God is asking you to step in faith in that direction. There's going to be a cost involved. When you make that decision to follow the Lord and to be obedient to Him, see, those who are truly called, and I'm using that word specifically, there's people who think they're called and they do ministry and they're gifted and they're talented and they do great things. But the truly called ones are the ones who are willing to leave family. They're willing to leave friends. They're willing to leave areas that they have become so connected and intertwined, and willing to go wherever it is God says go. Like that's the emphasis. Having that heartbeat, going back to the heartbeat of the master. We talked about how Jonathan in his armor bearer in the Old Testament, how the armor bearer looks at Jonathan and says, "Do whatever your heart desires. I am with you, heart and soul. I will go where you go." And again, Ruth echoes that in the book of Ruth, and I am with you, Naomi. You go where you go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. And they make this costly decision to follow and go where God directs them. The truly called minister will go wherever God directs their steps, not just in their own neighborhood, not just near close to family. They'll go wherever God says go. And that's an important thing. It's not about being in a position. It's about pleasing the master. My wife and I, we minister. We are the lead pastors of Albert Lee Assembly of God in Albert Lee, Minnesota, which, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be like, oh, I'm watching this on YouTube on the Albert Lee Assembly of God website. Yes. Or, Albert Lee, I said AG, YouTube or Facebook or Apple, whatever. We were not born here. We were not grown here. We never went to school here. we I grew up in Washington State, so behind me is north, in front of me is south, and so that means that Washington State is this way according to the direction I'm sitting in. I grew up in Washington State, and I grew up there. It was there that I felt the call to ministry. It was there that the Lord began to instruct me. It was there I began to grow my understanding. It was there I met a young woman, and that young woman was going to school in Tennessee, and I was desiring her greatly, and so we got married. And the deal I made was I would help her finish school, and so I moved to Tennessee. And in Tennessee, I started doing ministry, and it became, I understood what my calling was, that I'm going to go where God tells me to go, and I'm going to stay however long God tells me to stay. And so we went from Tennessee. We were in Tennessee ministry for 7 years, which was a very hard thing because I had people saying, "When are you going to move, Ryan? When are you going to come back to Washington?" And I was foolishly in my head, well, in 2 or 3 years, I'll move back. And I couldn't. I couldn't. I understood where God had called me. And even then, the doors of ministry closed in Tennessee and they opened in Texas. So we moved my family to Texas, and we ministered as youth pastors in Texas, and it was fantastic. It was a great place. We grew. We our skills grew. Our understanding grew, and um, I was able to learn a ton. I loved the people. I loved the church. I loved the area. It was fantastic. But then the Lord began to stir, and that we wanted to follow God's direction, and so we prayed and we sought where God was going to take us. And it wasn't to Washington. It wasn't back to Tennessee. It wasn't even in Texas. God opened the doors for Minnesota. And so we moved our whole family where God had us planted in Minnesota. And so now we deal with the snow and the ice and the cold and the wind and the storms and all that entails. And there's beautiful summers here too, by the way. It's not all cold and ice. There's a lot of beautiful greenery. But I say all that to emphasize this idea of a really truly called minister. You're going to sacrifice relationships. You're going to pay the cost of living in desirable areas. You're going to pay the cost of having to leave friends and leave loved ones. And it's because, you know what? It's not about me being in a position where I feel comfortable. It's about me going where God opens the doors. And so sometimes I think we have to get off of our high horse that says, well, I'm in this area. I was born and raised here. I'm only going to serve God in this city. How dare you try to limit God's calling when the master says, I've got another place for you? Ranting is over. Sometimes following Christ can mean living family. I mentioned this earlier, leaving family relationships. It can be an intentional thing. Leaving family, a separation of family relationships and following Christ can be intentional. Such as moving away from where they live, um, or even just an opposition to viewpoints, and how that can just kind of cut things off right there. And be sometimes they will completely separate you and cut you off because of your faith. And so that's a major thing, that has got that's a cost. But that's probably the intentional side of things. So then you have the unintentional side that is paid with the unintentional, and um that's where just your interest with old friends, or maybe you encountered the life-saving grace of Jesus Christ, and so um you were transitioning out, and your interest changed because God got a hold of you and he began to show you what glorifies him. And so your interests just change. And then your friends and family that say, hey, we're going to go drinking at the bar. And you're like, okay, great. Have a good time. And you don't go anymore. And as they do more and more stuff without you, you just find yourself distancing because that's the price you pay for following Christ. And that's just one of those things that comes alongside of that. Sometimes that cost again can come with um, altering what career we going into. Um, Back when we were in Tennessee, there came a point where I had lost a job and I was searching for another one. I was still working in the churches, and an opportunity arose to work for a really nice company that they had a very structured schedule system. and I had to choose between two different shifts to work. The problem with that was that the one shift would make it so that I would miss the days on Sunday mornings, while the other one would cause me to miss the nights on Wednesday night. And so either shift, I was not going to be able to obey what God had put in my heart. I could not perform the function that God had called me to do. And so I had to make a choice. Do I go into this really nice job that's going to be a great provision for my family, where I can climb a corporate ladder? Or am I going to forego that and join and continue working in the church and to focus on the ministry? And so I had to make that choice. And ultimately, in order to be the good armor bearer, the battle buddy, the to obey what the Lord had called me, it meant sacrificing that career, that opportunity that had arisen, and focusing solely on Christ alone and on the church. And I had to make that sacrificial, um, that decision to follow Christ in that way. And it was a hard one, and a lot of people don't understand that sacrifice. They don't understand why you will go and do a work where you're going to make almost next to nothing when you can, have a very lucrative job over here. The thing is, when it comes to following God, it comes to that battle buddy relationship that we have with the Lord Jesus and being obedient to the call and being obedient to what God asks us to do, that cost comes into play. And we have to realize that it's never about the money. It's never about the prestige or the position, as we've mentioned before. It's simply about living to please the master, living to please God. And that means paying the cost. The funny thing is, no matter how heavy the cost is to get certain things done, the beauty is that Christ establishes it in such a way that we're always able to pay it. If we're willing to say yes, he gives us the means to make that payment. Now, once more, as Jesus gave these two examples, he uses another metaphor to help explain the importance of really pushing through. Okay, so we saw the counting the cost and being mindful of it, but he gives another example of pushing through, and it's found in the last few verses of the chapter. He says in verse 34, "Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." And the fascinating thing about that verse is I've always seen this applied to living pure, living and like proclaiming the gospel and, showing the being that light for the war, that preserving righteousness, preserving those things. But in light of the rest of this context that we've been reading and connecting it to the rest of the chapter, I see something that gives it a little bit more meaning, and I see something that's really fascinating. And so it goes like this: if we quit before the job is done, everything that we have done lacks. Do you see what I'm saying here? It's if the salt loses its saltiness, it can't be made salty again. It's good for nothing. It just be thrown out on the ground. And that's the emphasis right here. That's really happening for us, is recognizing that it's got to retain its purpose. It has to retain why it was salt in the first place, and you have to continue. And if you don't continue in it, there's nothing good about it. It's worthless. It's pointless. The battle buddy is such an important relationship, both unto each other. Okay, so ministry partners, husband and wives, friends, co-workers, that unto each other, the battle buddy is a very important relationship. But even that, it's even more important unto God. And he uses this emphasis that like we have to maintain it. We have to continue in it. We can't give up no matter the cost. We just keep pushing forward. Okay? It is so vital that we don't leave this calling, that we don't leave this task or this job when we're still in the middle of it. Don't give in. Don't quit on following Christ. Don't quit on when you step into doing the ministry. Don't quit. You push through until you've seen it through. There's a ton of what ifs that I can come up with when it comes to scripture, when it comes to the word of God. You know, what if um what if Moses never did the whole burning bush experience? What if he said, "Well, thank you so much, but I got to watch my father-in-law's sheep," and he stayed in that place? What if what if Joshua said, "You know what? Marching all this time around Jericho is ridiculous. I'm not going to do it." What if Peter looked out on the waves in the ocean in the storm when he's in the boat and he looks at Jesus walking on the water and he says, "Yeah, okay, no, I'm good," and he quits? See, the problem is when it comes to our faith and exercising world-changing faith, real faith is filled with people who are not quitters. We see it through, even though we don't know how it's going to come out. We just move in faithfulness, and we do that, and stuff. God responds. Things happen, and it's an important thing. See, this role of armor bearer is so vital because it impacts all the other areas of our lives. It's what gives us our effectiveness to see the world change. Why? Because I'm not going to do half the work and then quit. I'm going to do everything I can with what I've been given to see the job all the way through. I go back to Joshua and his armor bearer. Can you imagine the armor bearer climbing halfway up the mountain and being like, "You know what? I'm exhausted. Joshua, Joshy boy, I quit." No, he's not. That Joshua would have been completely different. With all those things, and so we have to see that faithfulness of carrying through and going the distance. We count the cost because we need to know it's gonna take a lot of strength. It's gonna take a lot of energy. Let's not cheapen that fact. But the reward for pushing through is so great. And that's a principle for the battle buddy and the being armor bearers one to another and unto the Lord, that we take the cost that we've been given, we hold firm to it, and then we take these big steps forward and we transform the world because of it. So I hope that you got a lot out of this principle, that it's encouraging to you to count the cost and to continue in it. It should be very exciting for us. Once again, thank you. If you have enjoyed our online Bible studies and you would like to donate towards the church to help increase our effectiveness, we would welcome that so much. There's a link in the description below to give towards the ministry of the church. Also, if you watch these via the church app, there is the giving option in the church app, and that just helps increase our means of the church with our ministries and what we do here. And we would appreciate that. If you are in the area, we would love to have you join us. We have our Sunday morning worship and Sunday school. At 9 o'clock is Sunday school, 10 o'clock is worship. On Sunday mornings, we would love to have you be a part of that. Sunday nights at 6 p.m. is prayer, and that is a very powerful time as well. Midweeks, we meet on Wednesday nights. We have a fundraiser dinner at 5:30, and then our class groups all start around 6:30 as well on Wednesday nights. Our online classes release every Thursday morning at 7, and so you can catch the online classes at that time. Thank you so much. If you want more, download the church app. There's additional information in there. We have an exclusive series to there right now called Family Time. It's really good, and I take a very humble and transparent approach about parenting and family life, and really just discuss just simply what's on my heart and not a really in-depth prepared study. It's just me sharing my heart. Thank you so much for watching these. I hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, and God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.